All right, today we're diving into a legal battle over a single home in Idaho. But trust me, this is not just another foreclosure story. This thing pulls back the curtain on the entire foreclosure industry, and it asks some massive, and I mean massive, questions about fairness, fraud, and who the law really protects. So at its core, yeah, this is the story of a guy named Jeremy Boss, and he's facing the loss of his home. It's a situation thousands of people face every single year. But that's where the similarities stop. Because this whole case really turns on something super weird. A single piece of paper that showed up at the foreclosure auction. A check that seems to suggest the outcome was already a done deal long before any bidding was supposed to start. I mean, think about it. The check wasn't for a nice round number. It was for this exact amount, right down to the penny. In the world of public auctions, where bids are supposed to be competitive and unpredictable, showing up with a pre-printed check for the final price, that's a huge red flag. But this story isn't just about what happened at the auction. It's also about the homeowner's incredible countermove. See, Bass realized he was up against a really powerful system, so he laid this brilliant legal trap of his own, using simple, established law to build what he called a defensive fortress. So what you have, really, is a classic David versus Goliath story. You've got one homeowner, representing himself, by the way, against this whole network of venture capital firms, loan servicers, and law firms, a system he calls the foreclosure machine, one he argues is just designed to chew up properties and often bend the rules to do it. Okay, so to really get what happened in this one case in Idaho, we have to zoom out a little bit. We need to look at the system it's a part of, a system that was really forged in the fires of the 2008 financial crisis, which, as we know, left a long and very chaotic legacy. And this quote from a financial historian, it just nails it. He's arguing that the bizarre paperwork and the questionable stuff happening in Bass's case, this isn't new. These are the ghosts of that systemic breakdown from over a decade ago. You see, after 2008, the whole industry was a mess. You had robo-signing everywhere, people just stamping thousands of legal documents without even looking at them. Mortgages were bought and sold so many times that nobody knew who owned what. The paper trails were a complete disaster. And on top of that, servicers often made more money by foreclosing than by actually helping homeowners. This created a world where sloppy paperwork wasn't the exception. It was just how business was done. And that's where Jeremy Bass comes in. In 2017, his loan servicing gets handed over to a company called Carrington Mortgage Services. And almost immediately, things get weird. Now, Bass has a technical background, so he starts noticing things in the paperwork that, let's be honest, most of us would probably miss. I mean, just look at this timeline. For months, Carrington is pushing Bass hard to sign these backdated documents. They're calling him constantly, even offering what he called a $100 bribe to just sign the thing. He was convinced they were trying to get him to retroactively fix their own broken paper trail. But get this, the second he requests COVID forbearance so he can have time to figure it all out, the calls just stop. To him, that was proof this was never about a simple correction. It was about getting leverage for a foreclosure down the line. So everything boils over on February 29th, 2024, the day of the sale. This is where the story gets really dramatic and where all these allegations of a rigged system just come into crystal clear focus. The entire idea of a foreclosure sale, its legitimacy, it all comes down to this one question. A public auction is supposed to be open, competitive, transparent, all to make sure the house sells for the highest possible price. But what Bass claims happened on those courthouse steps was the exact opposite of that. Just look at these numbers. One bidder. That's it. 0 competing bids. And the real kicker? That bidder came prepared with a check already printed out for the exact to-the-penny winning bid. I mean, come on. This evidence makes it look like the auction was just for show, a little piece of theater to make a backroom deal look official. But here's the thing. Bass saw this coming. He didn't just sit back and wait for it to happen. The day before the sale, he made this incredibly clever, proactive move. He built what he calls a paper fortress, designed to completely jam up the normal eviction process that comes after a foreclosure. He did this by using a really key legal distinction. See, after a foreclosure, the old owner is called a tenant at sufferance. You basically have no rights and can be kicked out super fast. But a bona fide tenant, that is someone with a real, actual lease that was in place before the sale, they're protected by totally different laws. Evicting them is way, way harder and takes a lot longer. So check this out. Here's how this strategy worked in 3 steps. First, one day before the auction, Bass signs a totally legal 2-year lease with a tenant. Boom, legal tenancy established. Second, this move is designed to trigger all these federal and state tenant protection laws. And third, the goal was to force the new owners into a messy, complicated eviction lawsuit instead of the usual quick boot, giving Bass the time he desperately needed to fight the crooked sale in court. Okay, so the new owners try to kick Bass out, and the fight goes to court. But what he finds out pretty quick is that the battle isn't actually about his evidence of a rigged auction. It was about whether the court would even look at his evidence in the first place. And get this, in a huge ruling, the court basically says, nope, we're not looking at your evidence, all the stuff about the pre-printed check and the weird communications, because of a procedural rule. They said he filed it at the wrong time in the legal back and forth. The door to showing his evidence of fraud was slammed shut because of a technicality. Okay, this next part is just wow. After Bass appeals to a higher court, the other side's lawyers says their strategy out loud, in open court. They weren't going to fight the appeal based on the facts, no. Their plan was to physically get Bass out of the house as fast as humanly possible and then tell the appeals court, hey, this case is moot, it's irrelevant, because he's already gone. It's a cynical legal game, basically win by making the case disappear. And that's how this whole thing lands in front of the Idaho Supreme Court. Bass's appeal took this from a personal fight over one house and turned it into a case that puts the entire legal process on trial, asking some really fundamental questions about what justice and fairness even mean. This is really the heart of it, right? Can a court's strict rules and procedures be used as a shield to protect something that is, at its core, totally fraudulent? Or to put it another way, if you rig an auction, but you file all your paperwork perfectly, does the law just have to shrug and say, okay, you win? And then there's this question, which is all about fairness and access to justice. Should someone representing themselves, a pro se litigant, be expected to navigate this incredibly complex legal maze with the same skill as a big, powerful law firm? Or does the court have a duty to make sure they get a fair shot to argue their case, especially when their home is on the line? And this one, it gets right to the point about that auction. Where do you draw the line between a bidder just doing their homework and illegal coordination that rigs the whole game? What does the term public auction actually truly mean? So in the end, it all boils down to this one huge question. When the rigid rules of the legal process seem to clash with the basic search for justice, which one wins? It's the central conflict in this whole story, and the Idaho Supreme Court's answer could have ripple effects for homeowners everywhere.